Kevin McCarthy's stunning decision to drop out of the election for Speaker has thrown the House into an uproar, a very big story, no question about it. But some liberal commentators seem to be taking a certain glee in the GOP's troubles.
History was made today as one of the country's two main political parties came apart.
It was just stunning and amazing. Who runs the Republican Party? Nobody knows. Who gets to decide who runs the Republican Party? Say it with me now. Nobody knows.
Joining us now to examine the coverage of the House revolt and the Democratic race, here in Washington, Betsy Woodruff, reporter for the Daily Beast and formerly with National Review. The Atlantic's Molly Ball is still with us. And in Los Angeles, Fred Francis, a former NBC News senior correspondent, now with the firm 15seconds.com. Betsy, virtually all the pundits said Kevin McCarthy was a shoo-in, a lock. Wrong, okay? Are the media in general and some liberal commentators in particular turning this into, I don't know, Armageddon?
I can kind of go both ways on that. On the one hand, you can't I think a little bit they're turning it into Armageddon. That said, they're not totally wrong. I mean, it is chaotic. I was outside Longworth when the announcement came out. People were floored. Even McCarthy's biggest foes, members of the Freedom Caucus, were just astonished. So the fact that the media sees this as something crazy and wild and unprecedented makes sense because in a little way it sort of is. I think it's reasonable.
It is chaotic. I think that's a perfectly fair word. Fred Francis, great story, great political intrigue. We don't know who's going to run, who's going to be the speaker, but should the media treat a Beltway leadership fight as some kind of GOP civil war?
Well, it is a political civil war indeed, and this is like a political IED that went off in the Capitol this week. It's stunning to me there's so many reporters covering this story. I mean, hundreds of reporters. I mean, this is the best of times if you're a Hill reporter, and then to miss it, to get waylaid by it. It was so startling that I saw one reporter grabbing somebody from the GOP, it was Dana Bash from CNN, coming out of a caucus, and she didn't even know who the congressman was, just that he was a Republican congressman. That's how stunned people were. So this is a stunning development. It is political civil war, and I think it's just the first battle.
I can count on the former Pentagon correspondent to go with the war metaphor. Molly Ball. Kevin McCarthy also didn't help himself with those comments he made on Hannity. Hannity didn't even ask him a direct question about it, where he talked about the House Benghazi committee knocking down Hillary Clinton's poll numbers, making it all look political. Lurking in the background of all this have been these rumors. Now, these started on a little-known conservative website and then were picked up on Red State, a much better-known conservative website. Daily Caller mentioned it, The Week, about Kevin McCarthy supposedly having an affair with a Congresswoman, Renee Elmers, who has said this is absolutely positively not true. And before I knew it, it's the lead story in the liberal Huffington Post, and everybody is running with it. Is it fair to report this?
I think that's a really tough question for news organizations because, first of all, it's our job to tell people what the story is, why this happened. And so if we think that these rumors, and we do, were a part of what led to his decision, this very surprising decision to step down from the speakership race, then how do we report that story accurately while sort of ignoring the elephant in the room? Also,
but we don't know how much of a factor it was, and also it just makes me really uneasy that it's now become part of the political discourse when, in fact, there is no proof, there are denials, there are no documents, there are no photos to show that these two people had an affair, and yet it's become, journalism had run with it. But I understand the dilemma.
Well, and it's not just journalism, though, because this rumor was getting to Republican congressmen in their email inboxes. They were hearing about it. They were talking about it. And I agree with you. It makes me uncomfortable. We have to make it clear that there's no proof that this is the case. But when it's part of the story, and when that information is available to readers, because they can get it on the internet, on these blogs, do we ignore it in the quote-unquote mainstream media and pretend it's not there when people know about it?
Or do we use our megaphone to blast it out to people who maybe haven't seen it, when, again, these are unproven allegations?
I think the appropriate way to handle this is explaining, as Fred said, that everyone was waylaid by this decision, right, including the House Republican caucus. So the fact that, so as reporters, when we're approaching this story, we don't exactly know how McCarthy's decision came together. We can't read his mind. So putting this rumor in context as one possible motivation among others, I think, is the appropriate and responsible way to do it. I think deliberately ignoring something that, whether or not it's true, mattered and probably had some sort of impact, at least, like Molly said, in Republicans' inboxes from a powerful Republican donor out of Chicago. Yeah. Ignoring that, I think, would have been unfair.
Fred, brief comment on this?
Yeah, I think when it's a question of character, with the leader of the Republican Party, I think you're compelled to report it, even if there is no real evidence, because everybody's reading it. In this day and age, when everything is a public record almost instantly, you have to comment on it.
Unfortunately, in my view, that is also a formula for smearing people without facts, and I feel like the media here were complicit. All right, let me move to the Democratic race, and we're still going through this chatter about the Vice President of the United States and whether he is going to run for the top job. Take a look at what some people are saying.
Sources close to Vice President Biden tell me that he is likely to clearly signal his intentions by early next week whether or not he is going to be in this race.
Sources tell CBS News that Biden is likely to make a decision within the next week and is leaning toward running.
Okay, now, Joe Biden may announce as early as this weekend if he's running for president.
Molly, are you a little tired of all this breathlessness? He's in unless he's out. His friends say he's running, but some say they're not. He's in by this week. He'll decide by this week. No, it's next month.
Yeah, I mean, for everybody who wants to know if Joe Biden's going to run, I would advise them to go to sleep, take a nap, wake up in 2 weeks or so, and we will know, right? I mean, patience is the cure for all of this. But the fact is that I don't think Joe Biden knows, and so you have media grasping at straws, looking for clues, reading the twitch of an eyebrow, right, or the crook of an expression to try to figure out something. And when the man himself doesn't know, it's hard to read him because there isn't an answer.
We'll call that eyebrow journalism. All right, now, Politico got a lot of buzz going, for lack of a better phrase, with a story saying that Joe Biden himself, the vice president himself, was the source of a Maureen Dowd column in the New York Times in August that talked about his late son, Beau, and how while he was dying, he urged his dad to run for president. I think anybody reading that at the time could see it was pretty obvious that the vice president was behind that. What do you think?
We talked about it on the show when that happened. Exactly. Like, who else is going to be the source for that? And unless there's someone who can read. Right, exactly. Nobody else is in the room for that conversation. Of course this came from Joe Biden. It would be totally bizarre and insane for Maureen Dowd to report that if it hadn't come from Joe Biden.
And yet, Francis, the reaction was, at least among Biden's detractors, that, well, this was cold and calculating for him to leak this story to Maureen Dowd, as opposed to he's known her for a long time and he was just grieving, which he has been doing quite publicly.
But Howie, the leak in Washington is the coin of the realm, and shocking that the vice president would leak his own story. The backside of this story is, quite frankly, was it a calculating move? And what has he been doing in the last 2 months? Very calculating. History may show that this was all part of a plan to slowly get into the race. The cynic in me could believe that story. I'd like not to believe it about...
Right.
Yeah.
Whether it was calculating or not, we don't really know at this point. A historical irony is that in 1987, Maureen Dowd helped knock Joe Biden out of that year's presidential race by reporting by reporting the truth that he had plagiarized material from a British politician that had been leaked to Dowd by somebody on Michael Dukakis' campaign, who got fired as a result. All right, let me get a break. Head on media buzz. Donald Trump on the snarky coverage of his wife Melania. But first, Hillary and Bernie say they won't attack each other at Tuesday's first debate. Will it turn into a tepid affair?